The unseen contract. John Carter stood beside the bed, his heart heavy. His alien friend, Ravel, lay there, breathing slowly, his skin a pale shade of silver. The medical machines beeped softly, but John knew the truth. The doctors had said Ravel wouldn't make it through the night. "John, promise me," Ravel whispered, voice weak but eyes sharp. "Promise me, you'll take care of my sisters." John frowned. "Your sisters? I didn't know you had any." Ravel gave a faint smile. "I kept them hidden. Safe. But now, they have no one. You must protect them." John felt the weight of the request. He and Ravel had worked together for years on Yelaris, a distant colony world where humans and aliens lived side by side. They'd faced dangers together: pirates, political schemes, and a harsh alien environment. Ravel had saved John's life once during a mining accident. Now, John could repay that debt. "I promise," John said firmly. Ravel's eyes filled with relief. "By law, they're yours now." He squeezed John's hand. "Protect them, no matter what." The machines let out a long, steady beep. Ravel was gone. John stood there, confused. By law. What did he mean? The funeral was small. Ravel had few friends and even fewer who dared to attend. Yelari customs were strict, and many locals disapproved of Ravel's friendship with a human. After the ceremony, John turned to leave when three figures approached. They wore long cloaks with intricate patterns, their eyes, like liquid gold, fixed on him. The tallest one stepped forward and bowed. "Guardian," she said in a soft, melodic voice. John blinked. "Guardian? I'm just John." The woman pulled back her hood. Her silver skin shimmered like moonlight. "I am Tara, eldest sister of Ravel. These are my sisters, Kala and Vessi. You made the oath. You are now our guardian, and our husband." John's heart skipped a beat. "Wait, what? Husband?" In Yelari culture, Tira said calmly, to promise protection for unmarried sisters is to marry them by law. John stared at them. This has to be a mistake. I didn't mean. I just promised to help." Tyra's eyes softened. "The law does not care about intention. It only cares about the oath. You are now bound to us by the sacred contract of guardianship." John felt the blood drain from his face. The sisters exchanged worried glances. Suddenly, shadows moved around them. Alien enforcers in dark uniforms stepped out of the crowd. One of them, a scar-faced officer, pointed at John. "You have claimed these sisters without proper registration," the officer said. His voice was sharp and cold. "Come with us for questioning." The interrogation room smelled of metal and stale air. John sat at a table while the officer paced. "Mr. Carter," the officer said, "do you know the penalty for illegal guardian claims?" John rubbed his temples. "I didn't know I was claiming anything. I was just helping my dying friend." The officer snorted. "Ignorance of Yelari law is no excuse." He leaned closer. "These sisters belong to someone else. Warlord Garrick had petitioned for their bond. Now he demands your punishment." John's chest tightened. Punishment. By tradition, if a false guardian bond is made, the impostor must fight the rightful claimant. The officer smiled cruelly. "To the death." John sat in the cell, mind racing. "I promised Revel I'd protect them. But how?" He didn't even understand this world's laws. The sisters sat nearby, huddled together. Tira knelt beside him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ravel hoped to avoid this, but he had no choice. John swallowed hard. "Who is this warlord?" Tira's golden eyes turned dark. "Garrick is powerful. He wants us not as wives, but as keys." "Keys to what?" John asked. Tira hesitated. "Our family guards an ancient artifact. Garrick believes it can give him control over Yelaris." The door buzzed. The officer returned with a cruel smile. "Time's up, human. Warlord Garrick demands his duel." John stood slowly, his fists clenched. He wasn't a warrior, but he was a man of his word. "I promised I'd protect them," John said. "Let's get this over with." The officer chuckled. Brave, but foolish. The cell door slammed shut behind John as he stepped into the arena. The crowd roared. Across from him stood Garrick, 7 feet tall, armored, and holding an energy spear. John took a deep breath. He had promised. Now he had to survive. The marriage pact. The arena buzzed with alien voices, low, guttural growls mixed with sharp metallic clicks, and the occasional human whisper. The air smelled of hot sand and ozone, the byproduct of energy weapons primed and ready. John Carter stood in the center, sweat trickling down his neck. Across from him, Warlord Garrick loomed like a nightmare. The warlord's armor gleamed black with jagged edges, his eyes, red as molten iron, fixed on John like a predator eyeing prey. In his hands, the energy spear hummed with deadly promise. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena. By ancient law, Guardian John Carter challenges Warlord Garrick for rightful claim to the Sisters of Vel-Tirak. The fight is to the death. The crowd roared. John swallowed hard. He wasn't a soldier. He was a mining engineer turned merchant. But he had made a promise. The fight began. Garrick lunged. The energy spear crackled as it slashed through the air. John dove aside, narrowly missing a blast of searing plasma. His heart pounded in his chest. He scrambled to his feet, sand sticking to his palms. The warlord chuckled. "You don't belong here, human," he growled. "You don't understand the game you've stepped into." John ducked another strike, rolling behind a broken pillar. He needed a plan. Garrick was too strong, too fast. The spear could cut through stone. From the corner of his eye, John saw the sisters in the crowd. Tira met his gaze, her face calm but eyes wide with fear. Then she did something strange. She lifted her hands and traced a symbol in the air, a circle with 3 lines through it. John's mind raced. It was the same symbol he'd seen on Ravel's pendant, an old Yalari mining technique. No, wait. Ravel had once joked about an ancient dueling tradition. Strike thrice, then ground. John inhaled. He had one shot. He dashed from the pillar, charging straight at Garrick. The warlord roared in triumph and thrust the spear forward. John ducked and weaved to the left. The spear grazed his arm, burning through his shirt and searing his skin. The pain was blinding, but John counted aloud. 1. He ducked as Garrick stabbed again. 2. The spear slammed into the sand. Garrick swung horizontally. John leaped back. 3. On the 3rd strike, John slammed his boot onto the spear's shaft, forcing the tip into the ground. Sparks exploded as the spear short-circuited. The warlord's eyes widened in shock. John threw his full weight into a punch. His fist cracked against Garrick's jaw with a sickening crunch. The warlord stumbled. John didn't stop. He tackled Garrick, grabbed the spear, and jammed the sparking tip against the warlord's chest. The warlord went still. The crowd fell silent. The announcer's voice echoed. The human is victorious. The bond stands. John collapsed to his knees. Guards dragged Garrick away, and the sisters rushed to his side. "You did it," Tira said, voice shaking with relief. John coughed. "Yeah, I just outsmarted a giant alien with a trick your brother told me over drinks." He winced as the burn on his arm throbbed. "Now what?" Kella glanced around. "Now we run. Garrick won't accept this defeat. His power runs deep." They hurried through the city's shadowed streets. Yalaris's twin moons painted the stone walls with pale light. The alien architecture loomed above them, graceful arches and glowing vines that pulsed softly, as if the city itself breathed. They reached John's apartment, a modest metal pod perched on a platform overlooking the trade district. Tira locked the door with a biometric seal. John sank onto the couch. "Okay, now someone explain what's happening." The sisters exchanged glances. Tara spoke. Our family belongs to the Vel-Tirak line. We were once guardians of an ancient artifact, the Nexus Stone. It was hidden centuries ago to prevent it from being misused. John frowned. Misused how? Kala shifted nervously. The Nexus Stone can amplify energy. It can turn planetary defenses into weapons or power entire fleets. Carrick wants it to control Yelaris, and then the nearby colonies. John rubbed his temples. And now that I'm your guardian, I'm part of this mess. Yes, Vesey whispered. You carry the family oath. Great, John muttered. And what exactly does that mean? Tara sighed. It means you're bound by law to protect us and the artifact. Until death. The next morning, the news was everywhere. Warlord Garrick declares human guardian a threat to Yalaris security. Images showed John's face with red warning symbols. Garrick's influence had turned the city against them. John clenched his fists. We need to find this Nexus Stone before he does. Tyra hesitated. The map is hidden in Ravel's old mining logs, but retrieving it will alert Garrick. John stood. Then we better move fast. The sisters exchanged worried glances, but followed him. Outside, drones hovered overhead. The hunt had begun. The warlord's threat. The sky over Yelaris glowed red as the morning sun crested the mountains. The city, once a place of trade and fragile peace, now felt like a hunting ground. John Carter stood in the shadows of a stone archway, scanning the skyline for patrol drones. The three sisters, Tara, Kala, and Vesey, stood close behind him. Their silver skin shimmered faintly under their dark cloaks. We have to reach the mining district, Tara whispered. Ravel stored his logs in the old ore archives. John checked the stolen datapad they'd lifted from a patrol officer. Every district checkpoint was flagged with his face. Carrick wasn't wasting time. Drones are circling the main streets, John said. We'll need to go through the underpaths. Kala's eyes widened. The underpaths haven't been used in decades. They're dangerous. John gave a grim smile. So is Garrick. The underpaths ran beneath the city like veins in stone. The air was cold and damp, thick with the scent of rust and moss. The tunnel stretched for miles, remnants of Yalaris's first mining operations. Their footsteps echoed softly. John carried a plasma cutter he'd found in an abandoned maintenance box. Tira led the way with a small glow sphere. How did Ravel find this artifact? John asked. Tara's voice was soft. Our ancestors guarded it for generations. The Nexus Stone was hidden after the First Skarn War. Ravel spent years tracking down its location. And Carrick found out. Vesey shivered. Ravel tried to mislead him with false logs. But Garrick is relentless. The tunnel sloped downward. Ahead, a massive metal door blocked their path. It was covered in glowing Yalari script. Kala stepped forward, placing her palm on the door. The script shifted and flowed like liquid. The door rumbled open, revealing an ancient data terminal inside a small chamber. This is it, Tira said. She plugged a data crystal into the terminal. The screen flickered to life. Lines of code streamed past. Then an old video message appeared. Ravel's face looked back at them, pale and serious. If you're seeing this, I'm gone. The Nexus Stone is in the Obsidian Rift. Coordinates attached. But beware. Activating it without the bloodline will awaken the Sentinels. The message ended. A map appeared, marking the rift's location deep within the Vorten Mountains. John memorized the coordinates. We have what we need. Let's go. They retraced their steps through the tunnels. But as they reached the exit ladder, John froze. Shadows danced against the walls ahead. The hum of energy rifles filled the air. Tira cursed softly. They found us. Back, John hissed. They retreated to a side tunnel just as 3 patrolmen entered the chamber. Their rifles glowed with blue plasma charges. The lead patrolman activated his comm. Target is confirmed. The sisters are here. Warlord Garrick is inbound. John's heart raced. They needed a distraction. He spotted an old ventilation shaft above. "Climb up," he whispered to the sisters. They hesitated, then obeyed. As they climbed, John powered up the plasma cutter. The patrolman turned toward the sound. "Hey," John shouted, stepping into the open. "Looking for me?" The patrolmen raised their rifles. John fired the plasma cutter at a rusted gas pipe overhead. The pipe burst, releasing a cloud of thick vapor. Sparks from the cutter ignited it. Boom! The explosion shook the tunnel. John dived behind a support pillar as debris rained down. The patrolmen were thrown to the ground. "Go!" John yelled, scrambling after the sisters. They emerged from the underpaths into a rocky ravine beyond the city limits. The wind bit at their skin. In the distance, the jagged peaks of the Vorten Mountains loomed like broken teeth. Culla pointed to the sky. "Look!" A sleek black shuttle descended toward the city. It hull bore Garrick's crimson insignia, a claw wrapped around a sun. "He knows we have the map," John said. Tara's expression hardened. "He'll follow us. We need to reach the rift first." The journey through the mountains was brutal. The path was steep and covered in razor-sharp rocks. Cold wind howled through the canyons. John's legs ached with every step, but the sisters moved with practiced ease, guiding him along ancient trails. By nightfall, they reached a plateau overlooking the deep chasm. The rift. It stretched across the land like a wound, its walls made of smooth black stone. In the center stood a colossal stone platform etched with glowing lines. "The Nexus stone is beneath that platform," Tira said. John stared at the alien structure. "How do we get in?" Kella knelt by the edge of the platform and pressed her palm to a faint sigil. The ground trembled. The stone split open, revealing a staircase spiraling downward. They descended into darkness. The chamber below was vast, its walls covered in bioluminescent glyphs. At the center hovered the Nexus stone, a crystalline obelisk pulsing with soft blue light. John felt its presence in his bones. The air crackled with unseen energy. Tyra stepped forward and extended her hand toward the stone. The glyphs on the walls flared brighter. The stone's light shifted to deep crimson. Suddenly, the chamber shook. Stone panels slid open around the walls, revealing humanoid figures made of black metal. Their eyes glowed red. "The Sentinels," Vesey whispered. The mechanical figures stepped forward, energy blades humming to life. John raised the plasma cutter, though it felt laughably small. "Any ideas?" Tara reached into her cloak and pulled out Ravel's pendant. "The pendant is a key. But I need time." The Sentinels advanced. John tightened his grip on the plasma cutter. "I'll buy you time." The Sentinels charged. Outside, the night sky split open as Warlord Garrick's ship hovered over the rift. The Warlord watched the glowing chasm below, his lips curling into a hungry smile. "They found it," he said to his lieutenant. "Send the ground troops. The Nexus stone will be mine." The ship's engines roared as dark figures rappelled down into the rift. The ancient artifact. The chamber trembled as the Sentinels advanced. Their metallic limbs moved with eerie precision, each step resonating through the stone floor. Their glowing red eyes locked onto John and the sisters. Energy blades crackled to life, casting crimson reflections across the smooth black walls. John Carter tightened his grip on the plasma cutter. The tool hissed softly, designed for mining rock, not fighting ancient war machines. His muscles tensed. The Sentinels were fast, too fast. He had seconds, maybe less, before they'd be overwhelmed. "Tyra," John shouted, keeping his eyes on the nearest Sentinel. "Whatever you're doing, do it faster." Tyra knelt before the Nexus stone, gripping Ravel's pendant tightly. The artifact hovered in midair, pulsing with slow, deliberate energy, as though it breathed. Alien glyphs circled around it, shifting and glowing as the pendant interacted with the ancient system. "It's resisting me." Tira gasped. Sweat glistened on her forehead. "The stone senses our fear." John cursed under his breath. Great. An ancient, anxiety-sensing death machine. The lead sentinel lunged. Its blade hissed as it sliced through the air toward John's chest. He sidestepped, swinging the plasma cutter in a desperate arc. Sparks flew as the tool struck the metal figure's arm. The sentinel staggered but didn't fall. The others closed in. Kala and Vessi flanked John, each holding small curved daggers. The blades were ceremonial, too brittle to pierce sentinel armor, but the sisters wielded them with fierce determination. "We can't win this fight," Kala shouted as she slashed at a sentinel's knee joint. The blade snapped on impact. The machine swiveled its head toward her, blade raised high. John saw the strike coming. He dove across the floor, knocking Kala aside just as the blade struck. The weapon sliced his shoulder, leaving a searing gash. Pain flooded his senses. His vision blurred, but he forced himself to stand. Blood soaked his sleeve. "John." Vessi's voice trembled. "More are coming." She pointed to the walls. New openings appeared, and more sentinels emerged. Dozens. Their eyes glowed like stars in the dim chamber. "This is bad," John muttered. He yanked open a maintenance panel beside the platform, hoping to find anything useful. Inside was a thick cable glowing with faint blue energy. Desperation fueled him. He grabbed the cable and stabbed it into the closest sentinel's back. Electricity arced through the machine. It convulsed and collapsed, its eyes flickering out. John grinned grimly. They don't like direct power surges. He wrenched the cable free as the next sentinel approached. Tira cried out from the platform. The pendant glowed bright white, matching the Nexus stone's shifting light. Her voice, strained but determined, echoed through the chamber. "The artifact systems are ancient, confused. It recognizes us, but it also senses Garrick's presence. His forces are near." The ground trembled beneath their feet. The Nexus stone emitted a low, resonant hum. The glyphs shifted, forming an unfamiliar pattern. 3 interlocking circles with a central eye. "What does that mean?" John asked, dodging another sentinel strike. Tyra's eyes widened. "It's a distress call to planetary defenses." Outside, the rift's black surface cracked open. Towers of obsidian rose, glowing with blue lines of energy. High above, Garrick's shuttle hovered. His officers stared as the ground beneath them transformed. "What is this?" Garrick demanded. "Unknown, sir," his lieutenant responded. "Massive power signatures detected. It's ancient Yellari tech." Garrick smiled darkly. "The Nexus stone has awakened. Prepare the ground assault." In the chamber, the Nexus stone rose higher. Energy crackled across the floor, forming concentric circles. The sentinels froze mid-stride. Terra gasped. "The stone. It's preparing to release the Guardians." "Guardians?" John asked. "Aren't these things already Guardians?" "No." Tira shook her head. "These are just the Watchers. The true Guardians are far more dangerous." The air vibrated with an otherworldly hum. The sentinels suddenly collapsed, their power drained. But from the walls, massive, coffin-like structures slid open. Inside each one stood a larger figure, 3 meters tall, with black armor etched in glowing blue lines. The Guardians awoke. Their eyes glowed violet. John's heart pounded. "We just upgraded from knives to nukes." The lead Guardian stepped forward and scanned the group. Its voice resonated like a deep bell. "Identify." Terra held up the pendant. "We are of Vel Tirak. Bloodline heirs. We seek the stone's protection." The Guardian's eyes flickered. "Bloodline verified. Purpose: protect Yelaris from the coming invasion." The Guardians turned in unison toward the ceiling. Hostile forces detected. John followed their gaze. The stone ceiling trembled. The sound of explosions echoed from above. "Garrick," John muttered. The Guardian raised an arm. Energy surged from the Nexus stone into its core. Defense protocols engaged. Above ground, Garrick's troops swarmed the rift. Energy blasts lit the night. The warlord stood at the edge of the chasm, watching the glowing chamber below. "They've activated the artifact," he said, eyes gleaming. "But they don't know its true power." He raised his gauntlet and tapped a command rune. Deep beneath the ground, hidden coils of alien metal shuddered awake. The Nexus stone's light faltered. Inside the chamber, the Guardian staggered. The energy lines dimmed. Tira gasped. "He's overriding the stone." John clenched his fists. "How?" Call's face paled. "Garrick must have found part of the artifact's core. If he corrupts it, he'll control every planetary defense system." The Nexus stone crackled with chaotic energy. The walls split apart, revealing massive conduits pulsing with wild currents. The lead Guardian turned to John. "External control detected. Manual intervention required." John's stomach sank. What kind of intervention? The Guardian must merge with the core to purge external control. Vessie's voice broke. "Merge? You mean someone has to sacrifice themselves?" The Guardian didn't answer. The sisters looked at each other. Tira stepped forward, jaw clenched. "I'll do it." John caught her arm. "No. Ravel asked me to protect you. I won't stand here while you die." The chamber shuddered violently. The Nexus stone flickered. Above, the sound of alien gunships grew louder. "There's no time," Tira whispered. "The core won't accept you. You're not bloodline." John shook his head. "We're bonded. I swore to protect you." Maybe the Nexus recognizes that." Tira's eyes filled with tears. "Joan." No arguments. He gripped the pendant and faced the Guardian. "Tell me what to do." The Guardian extended its hand. "Place your palm on the stone. The core will do the rest." John stepped onto the platform. The Nexus stone pulsed like a frightened heart. He placed his palm on its surface. Energy surged through him. Agony. Light. The sensation of falling into an endless void. He saw flashes of alien wars, starships burning, planets shielded by the Nexus. He saw Ravel's face whisper, "Protect them." Then he saw Garrick. The warlord stood in a control chamber far above, his hands on a glowing console. John gritted his teeth. The energy swirled around him. He reached out, not physically, but with his mind, toward the corrupted circuits. The stone resisted. Garrick's influence was like thick, black vines choking its power. John pushed harder. The stone screamed in his mind. He roared back. Then the corruption shattered. Above, Garrick staggered backward as his control console exploded. "No," he roared. "Impossible." The rift's defenses surged to life. Energy beams shot skyward, obliterating his gunships. The ground beneath him cracked open. The warlord fell into darkness. In the chamber, the Nexus stone's glow softened. The Guardians powered down. John collapsed. The sisters rushed to him. His breathing was shallow, his skin cold. Tira cradled his head. "John, stay with us." His eyes fluttered open. "Told you. I'd protect you." The Nexus stone pulsed softly. From its core, a holographic map appeared. It showed the stars beyond Yularis and something moving through them. A fleet, vast and dark. Tara stared at the image. "That's not Garrick's fleet." John's voice was weak. "Then who are they?" The stone whispered in an ancient voice. "The others are coming." The hidden truth. John Carter lay on the cold stone floor, his body racked with exhaustion. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow. The Nexus stone hovered above him, its glow dimmer now, but steady. Faint energy patterns spiraled across its crystalline surface, whispering in an ancient language. Tira cradled John's head in her lap. Her fingers brushed the sweat-soaked hair from his forehead. "Stay with us," she pleaded. "You've done enough. Rest." John's eyes fluttered open. The world was a blur of shadows and soft blue light. "Did we stop Garrick?" Tara nodded, though her heart was heavy. Yes, you stopped him. The stone's defenses had annihilated Garrick's forces, and the warlord himself had been swallowed by the rift. The battle was over. But the war was just beginning. Kella knelt beside her sister, staring at the holographic map that still hovered above the stone. It displayed the Yalaris system, surrounded by faint concentric rings marking defense grids and planetary shields. Beyond those lines, from the deep void, dozens, no, hundreds, of unknown ships were moving toward them. The others are coming, Kella whispered, repeating the stone's last words. Who are they? Vessi stood at the edge of the platform, arms wrapped around herself. We always thought the Nexus stone was just a defensive artifact. But this, she gestured toward the map. This looks like a warning system. Tyra's mind raced. The stone was never just a weapon. It was a sentinel, watching the stars for a threat greater than Garrick. John stirred in her lap. We need answers. He groaned and tried to sit up, but his muscles screamed in protest. Not yet, Tyra said softly, pressing him down. You burned through half your nervous system merging with the stone. Rest. John gave a weak chuckle. Nervous system. Never used it much anyway. Hours later, after John drifted into uneasy sleep, the sisters gathered around the map. The Nexus stone's light pulsed with faint awareness, as though listening. We should leave Yalaris, Vessi said. If those ships are coming, we can't stop them. Tara shook her head. We are the last of Del Tirak, the guardians of this artifact. If we abandon our post, who will defend this world? Kella bit her lip. We don't even know what we're defending against. The stone responded to the unspoken question. The map zoomed outward, shifting through star charts older than any Yalari record. The sisters gasped. A vast region of space appeared, a dead zone known as the Void Expanse. Ancient legends said nothing lived there. The map highlighted swirling shadows in that darkness, revealing colossal structures orbiting a shattered planet. Tyra's voice trembled. The Nexus stone was built after the First Skarn War. The Skarn came from the Void Expanse. Kalla's eyes widened. The Skarn. But they were wiped out. Apparently not. Tyra stared at the swirling darkness on the map. They're returning. John woke to the sound of crackling energy. He sat up slowly, head pounding. The sisters stood near the Nexus stone, talking in hushed tones. He tried to listen, but the ringing in his ears blurred their words. He placed a hand on the platform for balance. The stone responded instantly, its glow intensifying. Images flooded John's mind. Planets consumed by shadow. Cities turned to ash. Massive biomechanical ships drifting through silent voids, their surfaces crawling with insect-like forms. He gasped, tearing his hand away. The vision stopped, but the sense of dread remained. Tyra rushed to his side. What did you see? Destruction. John's voice was hoarse. The Skarn aren't coming to conquer. They're coming to cleanse. The stone shifted its display. Symbols rearranged, forming new text in ancient Yalari script. Tyra translated aloud. The Skarn consume life to fuel their swarm. Yalaris is their next target. Kalla's face paled. Why this planet? The stone's glow dimmed, then brightened again. New words appeared. The Nexus stone, the last source of the primordial key. John looked at Tyra. What's the primordial key? Tyra swallowed. Legends say it's the core energy that binds all life together. The Nexus stone channels it to power planetary defenses. But if the Skarn get it, they can spread their swarm faster than ever. The stone projected a new image, a countdown in alien numerals. Tyra's breath caught in her throat. Kalla did the math. That's 48 hours. John's jaw tightened. In 48 hours, they'll be here. The plan. They huddled around the platform. John tapped the countdown. The Skarn want the stone. If we destroy it, we stop them. Right. Tyra hesitated. Maybe. but Yalaris loses its defenses forever. If we don't destroy it, the Skarn get unlimited power. The sisters exchanged troubled glances. They were guardians, sworn to protect the stone. But now that oath demanded sacrifice. Vessi spoke softly. We swore to protect our world, not the stone itself. If destroying it saves Yalaris, we must do it. Tira nodded. The stone's core is beneath the main platform. If we overload it, the resulting energy burst will destroy anything within a 100-kilometer radius. John ran a hand through his hair. Including us. Silence. Finally, Tira gave a sad smile. We were never going to outrun them, John. John exhaled. Okay. So we go down fighting. Descent into the core. The next morning, they descended deeper into the Nexus complex. The walls grew smoother, the air colder. The core chamber was massive. A sphere of polished obsidian surrounding a glowing crystalline heart suspended in midair. Tira approached a control console. The core crystal regulates planetary shields. If I invert the energy flow, it'll cause a cascading reaction. John watched the countdown. 32 hours left. As Tira worked, Kala kept watch near the entrance. Vessi knelt beside the core, whispering an old Yalari prayer. John placed a hand on Tira's shoulder. Are you okay? She gave a soft laugh. No, but I'll do it anyway. He squeezed her shoulder gently. That's what makes you brave. The moment stretched between them. In another life, maybe they'd have had time to explore what was growing between them. But here, beneath a dying planet, duty came first. The betrayal. The console beeped. The overload sequence was set. Energy surged through the walls, building toward critical mass. But then the chamber lights flickered. The core dimmed. No, Tira whispered. Something's interfering. The door to the chamber slammed open. A figure stepped through the shadows. Warlord Garrick. His armor was scorched, his face scarred, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. Behind him marched a dozen Skarn drones, twisted, insectile creatures with serrated limbs. Did you really think you killed me? Garrick sneered. I survived the rift, and I made a deal. John raised his plasma cutter. You sold out your planet. Garrick laughed. No, I evolved. The Skarn promised me power. In exchange, I delivered the key. He gestured toward the Nexus stone core. And you were kind enough to activate it for me. The drones surged forward. John fired the plasma cutter. Tira screamed as Garrick lunged toward the core controls. The final stand. The chamber erupted into chaos. The Skarn drones charged across the obsidian floor, their limbs clattering like a chorus of metallic claws. Their eyes glowed with sickly green light, and their elongated mandibles clicked in eerie synchronization. John Carter fired the plasma cutter, its blue-white beam slicing through the darkness. One drone fell, its carapace sizzling. Two more replaced it. Fall back, John shouted. Tira dragged Kala and Vessi behind a low-control console. Energy blasts crackled through the air as Garrick, still clad in his scorched warlord armor, advanced with terrifying calm. His eyes gleamed with crimson implants. You can't win, Carter, Garrick said, voice amplified through his helmet. The Nexus stone belongs to the Skarn now. And soon. So will Yalaris. John ducked as a drone's bladed arm struck the console beside his head, splintering metal. He twisted and jammed the plasma cutter into the drone's abdomen. Sparks flew, and the creature collapsed with an inhuman screech. Tira activated a shield barrier around the console, enclosing them in a shimmering blue dome. It crackled as Skarn drones slammed against it. John caught his breath. His burned shoulder throbbed, and every muscle screamed for relief. But there was no time for weakness. He glanced at the countdown timer on the Nexus control interface. 27 hours remaining. He's stalling us, John said. The Skarn fleet won't arrive for another day. He wants to secure the stone before they get here. Tira's hands flew over the control interface. He's not just securing it. He's trying to merge with it. She pointed to the holographic display. Energy streams from the Nexus stone now flowed directly into Garrick's armor. He's becoming the conduit. John swore. If he fuses with the core, he can override the planet's defenses completely. And Vesey added softly, he can open the rift beacon. John's stomach sank. The Skarn won't need to travel through space. He'll open a wormhole and bring the entire swarm here instantly. The shield crackled again. The drones were adapting, their limbs vibrating at frequencies that destabilized the energy field. Kala gripped her dagger. We can't just sit here. John nodded. We won't. He met Tira's gaze. You know the stone better than anyone. Can you cut Garrick off from the core? Tira hesitated. Yes, but I'll need time. And he'll know what I'm doing. John flexed his burned arm. Then I'll buy you time. The shield collapsed. John surged forward, plasma cutter raised. He fired a sustained beam at the nearest drone, melting its torso. The others swarmed him. A bladed appendage slashed across his thigh. Another drone lunged from the side. John spun, slamming the plasma cutter into its skull. Garrick watched from the core platform, lips curled in amusement. The Nexus stone pulsed brighter as more energy poured into his armor. His voice boomed through the chamber. You're nothing, Carter. Just a stubborn ape clinging to borrowed power. John fired at him, but a shimmering red shield deflected the blast. Garrick laughed. You can't stop evolution. Behind John, Tira knelt by the core's auxiliary console, her fingers dancing across the ancient glyphs. The stone resisted her, confused by Garrick's influence. Hurry, Tira, John shouted. I'm trying. She yelled back, sweat beading her brow. Kala and Vesey fought alongside John. Vesey jabbed her ceremonial dagger into a drone's eye socket. The creature convulsed and collapsed. Kala tripped another with a sweep of her leg, then stomped on its neck. But there were too many. The drones pinned John to the floor. Garrick strode forward, towering over him. His armor pulsed with raw energy. You should have walked away, the warlord sneered. John spat blood. I made a promise. Garrick raised his arm. Energy crackled around his gauntlet. A blast of crimson plasma slammed into John's chest. He screamed as his body convulsed under the onslaught. Tira's voice pierced the haze. No. Garrick turned toward her, eyes narrowing. Ah, the eldest sister. The key. He gestured, and the drones swarmed toward her. Tira's mind raced. The core interface was ancient, designed to respond to Yalari bloodline signatures. Ravel had taught her one failsafe, the reversal protocol. It would disconnect Garrick from the Nexus stone, but only if someone from the Vel-Tirak line willingly merged with the core. Tira's eyes locked on her sisters. Vesey and Kala fought desperately. John lay motionless on the ground. Garrick advanced toward her. She made her choice. Ancestors guide me, she whispered. She placed her palm on the core crystal. The cold surface bit into her skin. Her veins burned as the stone responded. Energy surged through her, linking her mind to the artifact's ancient network. Garrick froze mid-step. No, stop her. The drones abandoned their attack on John and the others, rushing toward Tira. John forced himself to move. He snatched the plasma cutter and hurled it across the chamber. It struck one drone's legs, tripping it. Vesey intercepted another with her dagger, but they were too slow. The lead drone reached Tira just as she completed the sequence. The core crystal exploded with light. Tira's consciousness expanded beyond the chamber, beyond Yalaris. She saw the planet's defense grid, ancient satellites orbiting silently above. She reached for them and felt their dormant power respond. Her awareness stretched further. The Skarn fleet lurked beyond the system's edge, biomechanical monstrosities pulsing with life. Their hive mind probed the Nexus stone like a predatory hand testing a locked door. Tira gripped the controls with her mind. The defenses roared to life. Planetary cannons pivoted toward the approaching fleet. In the chamber, Garrick screamed. His armor sparked and cracked as the Nexus stone rejected him. He staggered, clawing at his chest. The drones collapsed like puppets with severed strings. John rose, chest heaving. His eyes met Garrick's. "You lose." He launched himself at the warlord. They collided, crashing against the core platform. Garrick's gauntlet discharged wildly, sending arcs of energy into the walls. John grabbed the warlord's wrist and twisted. The gauntlet shattered. Garrick howled. Behind them, Tira's body convulsed as the core's energy consumed her. The overload sequence neared its peak. "Tira, shut it down," John yelled. "I can't." Her eyes glowed with the same pale blue light as the stone. "The system is locked. The Nexus must burn." John's stomach dropped. "No, we'll find another way." Tira smiled softly. "You promised to protect us. Let me protect you." The Nexus stone's hum deepened into a seismic roar. "Tira, don't." Kala screamed. "Goodbye, sisters," she whispered. "Live." The stone released its stored energy in a single blinding burst. Outside, the planet's orbital defenses fired in unison. Beams of sapphire light lanced into space, striking the Skarn fleet. The alien vessels disintegrated under the onslaught. The leading warships collapsed inward, their organic hulls unable to withstand the focused power of the Nexus core. The rift beacon imploded, sealing the wormhole before the swarm could pass through. Yelaris was safe. The blast shattered the core chamber. John and the sisters were thrown clear as the stone detonated. Garrick's scream was lost in the roar of collapsing rock. When the dust settled, the Nexus stone was gone. Tira lay motionless on the platform. Her skin, once silver, was now pale and cold. The pendant had melted in her hand. Kala and Vessi knelt beside her, sobbing. John sank to his knees. The weight of the moment crushed him. He reached out and closed Tira's eyes. "You saved us," he whispered. The chamber trembled as structural supports groaned. John pulled the sisters to their feet. "We need to go. Tira wouldn't want us to die here." They climbed through the wreckage, emerging onto the surface just as dawn broke. The rift was sealed. The skies were clear. John looked toward the horizon. For now, Yelaris was safe, but the memory of the fleet he'd seen beyond the void haunted him. The Skarn weren't finished. Far beyond Yelaris, in the darkness of the void expanse, the remaining Skarn hive observed the failed assault. A towering figure of biometal stood on a command platform. Its mind touched the remnants of the destroyed fleet, tasting the psychic scars left by the Nexus stone. "The stone is gone," the Skarn overmind whispered, "but the key remains. The human still lives." It extended its will toward Yelaris. "Begin the harvest." The new beginning. The wind howled across the plains of Yelaris as dawn painted the sky in pale orange and deep violet. The rift, once a gaping scar in the planet's surface, had sealed itself in molten glass, leaving behind only faint traces of the Nexus stone's energy. Smoke still rose from the distant mountain ridges, where planetary defense cannons had fired their last shots at the Skarn fleet. John Carter stood at the edge of the crater, leaning heavily on a metal staff. His ribs ached, his shoulder throbbed, and the burn across his chest felt like a permanent brand. He tightened his grip on the staff as his eyes fell on the 3 freshly marked stones before him. The central stone bore Tira's name, etched in both human and Yelari script. The ache in his chest deepened. She had sacrificed herself to stop the Nexus stone from falling into Skarn hands. Her death had saved the planet, but it left a hollow space in his heart. Kella placed a hand on John's arm. Her eyes, normally sharp and defiant, were dull with grief. She wouldn't want us standing here forever. John exhaled slowly. "I know." He gave Tara's marker one last look, then turned away. Vessi stood nearby, staring toward the horizon. The rising sun glinted off the faint scars of the battle. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning for residual Skarn tech. The planetary governor had declared victory, but John knew better. The Skarn weren't done. They returned to the small, battered apartment John had once called home. It was strange how the familiar walls now felt foreign. The city outside seemed quieter than usual. The markets were open, the streets cleaned of debris, and the public announcements declared the war over. But the air carried an invisible weight, like a string stretched too tight. Calla sat by the window, sharpening her dagger with slow mechanical strokes. Vesey paced near the kitchen, her fingers tracing the edges of a broken ceramic plate on the counter. John eased himself into the couch with a groan. His limbs felt like lead. The pendant Tira had held, the melted remains of the Vel-Terak family heirloom, rested in his palm. She said the stone was gone, he muttered. Calla stopped sharpening her dagger. It is gone. We watched it shatter. John ran his thumb over the twisted metal. The pendant had once contained the family's genetic signature, the key to activating the Nexus stone. Now, though broken, it pulsed faintly against his skin. The stone broke, John said. But the energy, it's still here. I can feel it. The sisters exchanged uneasy glances. John didn't blame them. Since his contact with the stone, he'd felt different. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he could hear faint whispers in languages he didn't know. Other times, he'd see flashes of the Skarn fleet in his dreams, detailed images of writhing biometal hulls and chittering drones. He hadn't told them everything. Maybe it's just the trauma, Vesey suggested, forcing optimism into her voice. Maybe, John said. But the pendant's faint warmth told him otherwise. That night, the dreams came again. John stood on a vast black plain beneath a sky without stars. The ground was smooth and reflective, mirroring his distorted image. In the distance, an enormous structure rose from the horizon. A spire made of shifting black tendrils, pulsing with faint blue light. He walked toward it. As he neared the structure, a voice echoed in his mind. The harvest is inevitable. The tendrils shifted, forming a doorway. John hesitated, then stepped through. Inside, the world transformed. He stood on a command bridge, surrounded by alien consoles pulsing with green bioluminescence. The air smelled metallic and damp. The floor vibrated beneath his feet. Across the room stood the Skarn Overmind. Its form was humanoid but stretched unnaturally tall, its limbs thin and jointed in too many places. Its skin was a metallic exoskeleton laced with veins of glowing blue. Its eyes, featureless and black, fixed on John. The Nexus was merely a beacon, the Overmind said. Now we know where you are. John's heart pounded. I'll stop you, he said. The Overmind tilted its head. You carry the key within you, human. The artifact's energy has bonded to your core. You are the gateway now. The creature stepped closer. John tried to move but was frozen in place. Your world will be the first, the Overmind said, its voice like grinding metal. But not the last. The creature raised its hand. A tendril shot forward, wrapping around John's chest. Pain stabbed through him as cold energy invaded his mind. John screamed. He woke with a jolt. The apartment lights flickered wildly. The pendant in his hand glowed bright blue, its surface humming with alien symbols. The sisters rushed to his side. John, what's happening? Calla shouted. John clutched his chest. His skin burned like fire. They're connected to me, he gasped. The Skarn. They can track me through the stone's energy. Vesey backed away from the pendant. You're saying you're the new Nexus? Not exactly, John said. He forced himself to sit up. The Nexus was a tool. I'm like a beacon now. They know I'm here, and they're coming. Calla cursed under her breath. So what do? We can't fight an entire swarm again without the stone. John squeezed the pendant. The whispers in his mind grew louder. This time, he focused on them. The alien language shifted, simplified, until it became clear. There's a second core, he said. The sisters froze. Impossible, Calla said. The Nexus was unique. John shook his head. The stone we knew was one of two. The other was hidden beyond the void. If we can find it, we can shut the Skarn out for good. How? Vesey asked. John rose, staggering toward the window. The night sky twinkled peacefully above, masking the threat beyond it. The pendant holds a fragment of the Nexus consciousness. It knows where the second core is. Calla grabbed her bag and slung it over her shoulder. Then what are we waiting for? John turned to her. The Skarn won't let us go easily. Calla's eyes burned with determination. Then we'll make them regret trying. The journey beyond. By morning, they were ready. John wore a reinforced exosuit to support his weakened muscles. The pendant hung from his neck, its glow steady. Calla armed herself with a plasma rifle and an array of explosives. Vesey carried a portable hacking unit designed to interface with alien systems. At the spaceport, they boarded a stolen Yulari scout ship. John took the pilot's seat. As the engines hummed to life, the pendant vibrated against his chest. A new map appeared on the navigation screen, a set of coordinates deep within the void expanse. John locked it in. Once we cross into the void, he said, there's no going back. Calla smiled grimly. Then let's go make some nightmares. Vesey gave a nervous laugh. This family doesn't know when to quit, does it? John's gaze hardened as the ship lifted off. The atmosphere thinned, and the vast blackness of space opened before them. We promised Tira we'd protect this world, he said. We'll finish what she started. The ship's engines roared as it accelerated toward the unknown. Epilogue. The Silent Observer. Far beyond Yularis, in the depths of the void expanse, the Skarn overmind turned its gaze toward the tiny ship speeding through the void. The human is coming, it whispered to its hive. He carries the last key. Prepare the crucible. The overmind extended its consciousness across the dark network of the swarm. A colossal structure, hidden within the shadows of a dead star, stirred to life. Its core pulsed with blue energy, the twin of the Nexus stone. The hunt had truly begun.